What if the ultimate victor of this brutal maritime conflict is determined entirely by the fundamental laws of structural physics rather than advanced electronics? The legendary A-10 Warthog currently shreds Iranian fiberglass hulls, but the kinetic reality of this contested naval choke point is absolutely terrifying. The incredibly powerful United States Navy is critically struggling to fundamentally secure the most vital commercial logistics corridor on the planet. 120 hostile vessels represents the exact kinetic tonnage the American surface fleet has completely obliterated recently. 2 massive aircraft carrier strike groups and 8 Aegis destroyers actively project roughly $40 billion of advanced naval engineering. And yet, the terrifying structural reality is that the vital Strait of Hormuz remains totally paralyzed to all global commercial shipping. 95% of commercial maritime traffic has completely vanished, while 3,000 massive steel tankers safely sit anchored. The dominant American naval architecture did not suffer a single catastrophic hull breach during this massive kinetic combat campaign. We systematically crushed their entire submarine displacement and ruthlessly dismantled every major steel combatant vessel they proudly possessed. And yet the global shipping lane stays totally closed, while the halted petroleum flow continuously bleeds the world economy. The fundamental engineering reason for this massive logistical paralysis is a calculated physical state called a fleet in being. Tehran actively utilizes the constant kinetic threat of incredibly cheap attack vessels to artificially inflate global maritime insurance calculations. This escalating conflict is definitively not a traditional battle of heavy naval tonnage, but a brutal campaign of kinetic attrition. The most highly engineered maritime fleet in human history urgently contacted the Air Force to deploy a pure mechanical relic. This 50-year-old heavily armored machine was initially designed to violently penetrate massive Soviet steel tanks across Europe. Arrogant defense engineers historically labeled this rugged aircraft entirely structurally obsolete, until this exact maritime physics problem immediately emerged. To perfectly understand why a massive nuclear carrier cannot solve a physical problem this jet instantly fixes, we must carefully analyze the water. The fundamental anatomy of this highly lethal maritime threat completely defies modern conventional naval engineering logic. The Revolutionary Guard absolutely does not require deploying incredibly expensive radar-absorbent stealth coatings to effectively blind American warships. Their highly capable maritime engineers actively construct these tiny assault hulls entirely from exceptionally cheap commercial fiberglass and composite polymers. This highly specific material choice fundamentally possesses a naturally microscopic radar cross-section that incredibly sophisticated mechanical sensors simply ignore. When these incredibly small composite structures violently bounce across the chaotic ocean waves at 70 knots, they create massive signal clutter. The brutal swarm dynamics essentially involve launching dozens of high-horsepower outboard engines simultaneously to rapidly flood the tactical zone. Every single fiberglass boat, aggressively zigzagging through the heavy sea state, dynamically generates thousands of false electronic radar returns. The ultimate engineering goal of this terrifying asymmetric attack is absolutely not to outgun the massive nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Their highly calculated mechanical objective is to violently crash the incredibly advanced processing bandwidth of the sophisticated Aegis combat computer. The defending tactical action officer stares helplessly at glowing radar screens entirely choked by thousands of overlapping mechanical threat vectors. This aggressive structural physics strategy deliberately forces the highly advanced defense grid to mathematically collapse under pure data overload. The catastrophic mechanical failure of highly advanced American defense technology completely stems from massive structural over-engineering. Let us carefully analyze the absolutely absurd kinetic physics of launching a highly sophisticated SM-6 defensive interceptor missile. That massive multi-million-dollar rocket violently accelerates to Mach 3 to successfully destroy high-altitude supersonic ballistic threats. Forcing that incredibly fast weapon to accurately strike a tiny plastic boat violently bouncing on ocean waves is mathematically impossible. The highly legendary Harpoon anti-ship missile system contains a highly sensitive mechanical radar seeker, meticulously designed for massive steel targets. The sophisticated engineers specifically calibrated that mechanical seeker to instantly lock onto a 10,000-ton heavy metal cruiser. It completely fails to structurally recognize a tiny fiberglass skiff actively hiding between massive commercial cargo ships in the congested lane. The most terrifying mechanical limitation of the modern American surface fleet safely resides within the highly advanced vertical launch system. Those highly capable guided missile destroyers absolutely cannot physically reload their incredibly expensive defensive missile tubes while currently deployed at sea. Every single time the desperate captain defensively fires a weapon, they permanently deplete the mechanical defensive capacity of the entire warship. Deploying highly expensive deep-water kinetic interceptors into a chaotic, shallow-water environment represents an absolute engineering failure. The legendary A-10 Thunderbolt miraculously arrives on this chaotic maritime battlefield as the absolute ultimate kinetic engineering equalizer. To properly understand this specific machine, you must realize it is fundamentally not a traditional airplane but a massive flying cannon. The incredibly brutal GAU-8 Avenger mechanical Gatling gun heavily dictates the entire structural architecture of the heavily armored titanium airframe. That massive 7-barrel rotary cannon violently fires incredibly heavy 30mm armor-piercing projectiles constructed from solid depleted uranium. The terrifying kinetic energy transfer of a single depleted uranium round instantly shatters the incredibly fragile composite matrix of the hostile boats. The absolute mechanical firing rate of 3,900 rounds per minute completely solves the chaotic tactical window of opportunity. An incredibly fast defensive missile frequently misses the erratic fiberglass boat because the target wildly changes its physical trajectory instantly. A massive continuous stream of heavy depleted uranium completely blankets the entire physical area and mechanically tears the explosive vessel apart. This highly brutal application of pure kinetic logic effortlessly crushes the incredibly expensive structural assets of the hostile proxy forces. The massive mechanical roar of that heavy cannon instantly breaks the carefully calculated logistical supply chain of the dangerous enemy swarm. The highly specific aerodynamic profile of the designated kill zone completely dictates which specific aviation machines physically survive the engagement. Modern military aviation engineers constantly obsess over incredibly sleek, swept-wing designs required to break the supersonic sound barrier seamlessly. Those highly advanced F-35 and F-18 fighter jets actively suffer from a fatal aerodynamic flaw when aggressively hunting incredibly slow surface boats. A highly swept wing physically struggles to generate sufficient aerodynamic lift at slow speeds, immediately forcing the jet to fly dangerously fast. When a supersonic fighter jet aggressively crosses the congested maritime choke point, the pilot visually observes the surface targets for exactly 2 seconds. The heavily armored Warthog proudly utilizes a highly unusual straight wing, aerodynamic design originally perfected during the early Cold War era. This highly efficient straight wing configuration naturally generates incredible sustained aerodynamic lift while flying at a remarkably slow 300 knots. This incredible low and slow physical advantage safely grants the heavy attack jet genuinely unmatched loiter time above the dangerous brown water. In an incredibly chaotic coastal environment, heavily suffering from massive radar clutter, the human eye remains the ultimate optical sensor. The highly experienced Warthog pilot safely utilizes superior physical loiter time to visually distinguish hostile rocket launchers from innocent fishing nets. What is currently unfolding perfectly above the contested Persian Gulf represents an incredibly flawless networked kinetic web of integrated military destruction. The brutal mechanical muscle of the Air Force completely integrates with the highly sophisticated digital brain of the advanced Navy. This highly complex mechanical kill chain heavily relies on extremely precise targeting telemetry, continuously broadcasted by advanced Navy maritime helicopters. Those highly capable MH-60R Seahawk rotorcraft safely utilize advanced electro-optical sensors to seamlessly track the erratic fiberglass boats through the waves. They instantly transmit those exact physical coordinates directly into the highly rugged analog cockpit of the circling heavy attack jet. When the Warthog aggressively rolls into a steep tactical dive, it acts as the ultimate physical anchor for the entire defensive architecture. By actively relying on cheap aerial kinetic energy to violently sanitize the congested surface, the massive warships safely conserve their strategic missiles. This highly flawless integration of brutal mechanical firepower and sophisticated digital targeting absolutely saves the entire American fleet from total ammunition exhaustion. The hostile maritime engineers completely failed to calculate the catastrophic physical damage a properly supported heavy aerial cannon easily inflicts. The incredibly adaptable American military completely reversed the physical mathematics of the coastal battlefield to successfully achieve total kinetic dominance. The ultimate engineering lesson, forcefully extracted from this chaotic maritime environment, completely shatters the modern military-industrial paradox entirely. The absolutely perfect technological solution for an incredibly complex 21st century geopolitical crisis is a simple mechanical beast from the 70s. The massive American defense industry aggressively lobbies the Pentagon to permanently scrap this perfectly adapted machine because it fundamentally lacks stealth. Arrogant military bureaucrats absolutely despise the aging, heavily armored jet because it does not possess a highly reflective, futuristic radar-absorbing coating. They constantly demand billions of dollars to carefully develop incredibly fragile laser weapons that completely overheat after firing exactly 3 times. However, the brutal mechanical physics of the contested Persian Gulf violently reject those highly expensive futuristic defense concepts entirely. When a highly aggressive swarm of 50 explosive fiberglass vessels suddenly accelerates toward a trapped commercial oil tanker, you need mechanical violence. You absolutely do not need an incredibly sophisticated stealth fighter securely dropping a single highly expensive precision bomb from 40,000 feet. You desperately require the incredibly brutal sustained kinetic energy continuously delivered by a massive mechanical cannon firing heavy depleted uranium rounds. The global commercial supply chain heavily relies on the highly specific physical attributes of this exact aging military airframe to securely survive. The United States Congress currently plans to completely dismantle and permanently retire every single active Warthog by the end of this decade. Imagine a terrifying physical reality where this incredible mechanical equalizer is completely dragged into the dusty boneyard and chopped into scrap metal. Following that absolutely disastrous engineering decision, a massive coordinated swarm of 500 explosive fiberglass boats violently chokes the critical logistical strait. What exact mechanical engineering platform currently exists to brutally deliver the necessary kinetic tonnage to properly secure the international waters? Let me clearly know your exact tactical engineering solution and physical defense calculations safely down in the active comments below.